When did you realize that hard work does not always pay off? I never called off from work, and yes, I understand now why that isn't always a good thing, but when I was young, I thought you went to work unless you were on your last breath. At a staff meeting, my boss was reprimanding everyone for calling off too much, and his second in command said, "Well, except for vertical parachute, they've never missed a day." My boss responded, really? I never noticed. Yep, lesson learned on my part. Well, I'm sure lots of other people noticed, but the guy that's supposed to have noticed and that mattered the most didn't, so sucks for him. Story 2. Easily, retail. Those performance based raises are deliberately rigged to not give people the best raises. I only really understood how much when I became a manager and was overruled on how much to give my employees a raise when I gave them a 5 out of 5. I was told, and I quote, "No one is a 5 out of 5. She came in whenever we called, stayed late whenever we needed to, was the epitome of the perfect employee, and was well loved by everyone that shopped there. They changed her evaluation from a 5 out of 5, which was, I believe, a 50-ish cent raise, still not enough, to a 3 out of 5, which was a 10-cent raise. She quit a few weeks later after I told her, and no one we've hired has been half as productive as she was." Story 3. Worked this office job for 9 years, ever since I turned like 16. They kept giving me responsibilities, never any pay raise beyond the minimum they had to, all the while telling me how I was indispensable. Lockdown, COVID hit, and they laid off all of my coworkers. They told me I could stay, but for less hours than before, and definitely no pay raise, just more responsibilities, either working from home or in an empty office. I declined the offer and quit right then and there. Felt pretty cheated though. Story 4. Worked hard at my first job for an entire year after a 20-cent raise. Got a 10-cent raise after that year, while a guy that avoided work got a 40-cent raise. So I avoided working too hard for a year and got a 40-cent raise. No BS. Also passed up a crew leader position to work in an easier area. Then they made me a crew leader anyway in the new area. I didn't even ask. The company I work for now does some totally backward stuff too. It drives me nuts. Progress takes time, and there's a fine line between getting stuck because you're too good at something and getting moved on to promote you. Story 5. By being taken advantage of repeatedly. Go above and beyond the expectations in hopes to advance. You now have to do that advanced job with way more work for no pay increase and in less time than the people getting paid more than you. Don't ever let an employer know you're capable of or willing to do significantly more work than anyone else for the same pay. If an opening arises and you have been consistent, you're more likely to get the position than someone who does twice the work you do for the same pay just because you follow the book more. Story 6. I was 19 years old and working for a pet store located inside of a department store. It was a separate company. I was the assistant manager, third in command. The actual assistant manager lived about 40 miles away, so she wasn't there very often, and the manager was being treated for cancer and lived 20 miles away. I, however, lived just a mile away. Keep in mind that even though I wasn't the manager, I was ordering thousands of dollars worth of supplies every week. They involved calling the supply company, unloading stock, stocking shelves, keeping records, and even training new employees. During one January snowstorm in New England, we got hit with 2 feet of snow overnight. I received a call to come in since the store had no power. I walked a mile in 2 feet of snow, trying not to get hit by fishtailing cars. I arrived at 8 a.m. and they let me in while the few customers standing outside were visibly annoyed. So I spent the entire day, 8 hours, taking care of the fish, birds, mammals, snakes, etc. This included changing their litter, feeding them, and removing any deceased fish since the tanks were getting cooler with no heat. My boss thanked me. She was great. 6 months later, I showed up for my shift, and my manager and her sister were standing there. Her sister was the manager of another one of our stores. Her sister spoke to me and explained I was being let go because the quality of my work had supposedly dropped. I looked at my boss, whose head had been down, avoiding my gaze. She gave me a look that basically screamed, "This isn't me, this came from above." She didn't say anything other than, "Sorry," but her expression told the entire story. I was mad at the sister at the time, but quickly got over it. I realized what was happening because I was essentially running the entire store, so no, my quality hadn't slipped. 6 months later, the company went bankrupt and out of business. I definitely had the last laugh. Story 7. Like most people here, this was my first job. I was working at a pizza place known for letting customers bake the pizzas at home. I was earning minimum wage, but I felt like I'd been there a while and wanted to move up. So I talked to my boss about a possible raise. She said she'd keep an eye on my performance over the next month and see if I deserved it. Now, there was another employee there named Jimmy. Jimmy was great during a rush because, in those instances, just having an extra pair of hands makes a difference. But in all other aspects of running the store, he was unhelpful. He slacked off and left his work for the rest of us to do. Of course, the manager seemed to favor him. After a month of picking up every shift I could and doing every unpleasant task assigned to me, my boss told me that I'd been doing a fantastic job and that I earned my raise. I looked at my check and saw I was now making an extra 50 cents an hour. Not great, but I was 16 at the time and it felt like my effort was being rewarded. Until I found out that Jimmy also got a 50-cent raise, and everyone else did too. It turned out the minimum wage was increasing nationally, and they were legally obligated to give everyone a raise. When I confronted her about this, she turned the tables on me, telling me that discussing my pay with other employees was unprofessional. She went on vacation shortly after that. I taped my 2-week notice to her door the day after she left. Story 8. When I was proficient at my work, the boss brought in her old husband to replace me. I did the most amount of work on that particular task, the most anyone had ever done, but it wasn't good enough to keep me employed. I also did a great, determined job in the warehouse, but because the boss liked keeping us as casuals and cutting costs wherever possible, and glaring at me too, I realized that working hard wasn't worth it. So study hard and earn qualifications and become a worthy asset. Story 9. I worked for a company for a few years in my early 20s. I worked extremely hard and was essentially performing a manager's job for very little money. Our manager had left a while before, and they just had me take on his duties. They then hired a 40-year-old guy to help in the warehouse doing basic tasks. They hired him at twice my salary. I brought it up with the owner and asked for a pay raise, explaining why I deserve one and approaching it professionally. His response was no, stating that because I was young, the other guy had a family and a house, which is why he was getting paid more. I could have lost my temper. I realized I needed to cut my losses, so I quit on the spot. Story 10. I was working retail overnight, and I worked my ass off, partly to keep from getting tired. My living situation started falling apart, and I had nowhere to go if I had to move, so I was very stressed. My quote-unquote fun boss, who everyone loved, came over to ask why I wasn't working as hard as usual. I told him I was possibly a week from being homeless, and he just kept smiling and repeating the phrase, "You're usually my superstar. I need you to be my superstar, buddy." My hard work wasn't valued at all. This boss only cared that I'd been making him look good by accomplishing so much. No one at the store actually cared about me as a person. I've told this story here before, but the truth is I never worked hard again. No matter how hard a job tried to pressure me that something absolutely had to be done, I never worked that hard for anyone ever again. Story 11. My first job was a cashier at Burger King. I worked incredibly hard. I was 16 or 17 in high school, working over 40 hours every week, despite child labor laws. Somehow my grades didn't suffer, but my health did. I regularly got maybe 5 hours of sleep a week, with a maximum of 4 or 5 a night being very rare. Usually when I had a day off and most assignments were caught up. I received a couple of raises, but it wasn't worth the effort I was putting in. Many managers dislike being managers or even dislike working, so they would give me their keys and say that if I needed anything, they would be out back smoking, engaging in intimate activity in the bathroom, or outside on the phone, etc. for their entire shift. I essentially became the manager without the pay. Finally, I got tired of it and submitted my 2 weeks notice. They told me if I stayed, I would be promoted to manager, so I stayed. I waited a couple of weeks, but nothing happened. They then hired a new person directly as a manager. It was the same situation. The new guy just gave me his keys and stayed in the office on his phone. When I asked about being promoted to manager, the general manager said they couldn't make me a manager because I was needed in the drive-thru, and they wouldn't be able to find a replacement. I asked for a raise, but they said, "No, we can't afford that." I reiterated my request to be made a manager, and they again said, "No, we like you where you are." Okay, so I finally put in my 2 weeks notice and officially left. Screw that place. Story 12. The studio I'm working at suffered pretty hard at the beginning of lockdown. I was hired in 2019 and I hadn't even been here a year yet. My coworker has been working with the company for 10 or 15 years. I had new skills, I do graphic design, I know how to run a printer, and I know how to use 2 more programs than my coworker did. He showed up earlier than he ever needed to and often stayed 30 minutes or an hour after he was supposed to clock out. He was a hard worker and would cut his lunches short to make sure the shop was running. He could do everything printing and machine related in the shop, but technically he himself did not own any skills or knowledge that someone else in the shop didn't already have. When lockdown hit, he was one of the first laid off, but I still maintained my position even now, all because I know how to use Illustrator and Photoshop and he did not. 10 plus years experience and hours of extra work meant very little, apparently. I've got survivor's guilt pretty bad, and I can't imagine what he felt knowing I was keeping my job for 7 months and he was losing his after 15 years. I'm sure he's happy for me, but still, it's an extremely sobering experience. Story 13. I was a competitive Irish step dancer for 7 years. There's a very well developed competition circuit in Irish step dancing with local competitions called a face, qualifying you for a regional competition known as the Oireachtas, which qualifies you for a national competition, which qualifies you for the World Championships. I started a little later than most at 9, but I worked my back off, took 6 to 8 hours of classes per week, and practice on a stage in my parents' basement for an additional 2 to 4 hours a day. I videotaped myself, had mirrors set up so I could improve my form, etc. But there was one kid in my age group who was the best in the world. He won the World Championships multiple years in a row, and he didn't practice for crap either. Our teacher confirmed to me that I outworked him day in and day out, but I never once beat him, all the way up until I injured my toe and gave up competing. I ended up performing professionally for about a decade after I stopped competing, often with him, and he and I became friends, but I could never ever reach his skill level. There's a valuable lesson in there. I don't know what it is, but it's there. I guess the lesson is to never compete with others because some people have an advantage you can never have. Only compete with yourself so that you can be the best you can be. Story 14. When you see people get jobs based on their family working there and the benefits of a safety net, it highlights a stark reality. Yes, hard work can benefit you, but having a family member you're on good terms with in a position to hire you is a huge advantage. Think about how much effort you have to put in to earn an extra $10,000. Even in a well-paying job, it takes significant effort, especially if it's an in-demand skill. Some folks just get that, sometimes more, and hard work often makes no difference. It's just a part of life right now. Story 15. My first job out of grad school, spent 2.5 years there, consistently outperforming basically everyone, taking on larger and larger projects and being a resource to new employees during the onboarding process. I asked for a promotion twice, got rejected for quite ridiculous reasons. After the second time I got rejected, my management meeting started getting negative. I wasn't a team player. I needed to take on more projects. I wasn't bringing in enough money. I was in development. After a month at these meetings, I saw the writing on the wall and started job searching like crazy. 3 months later, I cheerfully celebrated an offer that paid me $17K more, gave me the promotion I was looking for, and let me work from home whenever I wanted. Story 16. Every job I have ever had has been challenging for me. I'm autistic and very antisocial. I know how I come across and I don't mean to, but after a lifetime of trying to change and be more likable, it just hasn't worked. So I try to compensate by being a diligent worker. I show up early, I work hard, I volunteer for as many tasks as I can, and I strive to be a low-drama employee. However, it has never once worked out for me. Instead, bubbly, outgoing colleagues like Becky and John, who pick and choose only to do what interests them while leaving everything else for me, gets noticed and praised. This has made me a very bitter person, and I hate that about myself. Story 17. My mother worked from the time she graduated high school until a few years ago when she was diagnosed with cancer. Her company fired her because they didn't want to pay for her treatments, though they didn't say that obviously. Then she got dementia as a side effect from those treatments, then early onset Alzheimer's. We lost our house and we had to stay in hotels until my dad's money was dwindling. And we had to take the first thing available, which was a trailer with a very strict 3-person limit. So she couldn't live with us and ended up in her car with a friend, and your government stole money from her Social Security. So if you think you've made the right choice by working half your life away, think again. The government will never be there for you, and companies will always take the opportunity to save money. I don't care if a few of you have gotten lucky with good companies, it doesn't matter. If even one person is neglected, that is too many. This all could have been avoided if the government had done their job. Story 18. I used to be a super hard worker who cared a lot about the quality of my work and making a good impression, but I made too much of a good impression and the expectations of me just got higher and higher with absolutely zero benefit to me. I just switched positions in the same company and now I get to be at the bottom of the totem pole again. No one asks me for extra help because I'm just the new girl. I've used this opportunity to set the bar low and just keep it there. I take my assigned breaks, I don't go above and beyond. I do not come in early or leave late. I come in, I do my job to the best of my ability without stressing out. I keep to myself and go home. It's perfect. Story 19. I'm a former military member. My company commander received an award for her leadership and mission-focused work that she didn't actually do. She literally took leave for 3 weeks, was always home by 5 p.m., posting on Facebook, etc. Meanwhile, all of us, including the field-grade officers and senior NCOs, are pulling 70-plus hour weeks with no weekends or allowable leave for 6 straight months. We were so understaffed that lieutenants were forced to do a lot of manual labor. Screw her, screw the military, the system is so fundamentally broken. Story 20. The third time my old job passed me over for a promotion, I was already doing the duties of the job and had been promised it was going to me this time. He ended up promoting the person who started 2 years after me that I trained. I said screw it and had a new job lined up within a few weeks. After I left, most of the rest of the crew also left. They since left a ton of business and lost the local best of competition they had won all 4 years I had been there. I was pulling in millions of dollars for the company annually and was a top performing salesperson there every year. And they still chose to screw me over. In the end, they just screwed themselves over. Story 21. I went to a Christian school. One of our teachers held a month-long contest where we do fun little things for points. Trivia contests like Jeopardy, basket weaving, or reading a certain book, etc. At the end of the month, the teacher promised an awesome prize for the winner. I worked so hard, I really went the extra mile. I even started a donation box for missionary work at my public school. I attended both, and then brought it to my teacher. At the end of the month, we counted the points, and I just knew I was going to win that awesome mystery prize. I was right, and no child was quite as deserving as I was. The awesome mystery prize was a bookmark. A bookmark. That's not even a whole piece of paper. I vowed to keep that bookmark forever as a reminder that hard work doesn't always pay off. It's been almost 30 years, and I still have that bookmark. I don't think I ever used it for reading, though. Story 22. At a tavern I used to work at, the attractive female staff always seemed to receive preferential treatment. For example, they could take longer breaks or spend their shifts chatting and flirting with the male managers. Meanwhile, I, despite being a dedicated and well-known worker, would constantly be left to handle everything. Their popularity, rather than their work ethic, seemed to get them the better shifts, leaving me with the graveyard shifts or those that nobody else wanted or bothered to show up for. The job paid exceptionally well, but the social dynamics behind the scenes were incredibly frustrating. It just felt like high school all over again. Story 23. Worked for multiple software companies, was the leading engineer on so many projects, spent days and nights working my back off. Twice I saw companies sold off or bought up and not a single cent in my direction. Then I saw my manager at another company spend most of his day watching his bar cameras to make sure not a single drink was given away. What else? Could go on for days. Capital serves capital, and that's it at this point. Capitalism has served its purpose, and we need to change things in a big way, or else this system will not even be able to support itself under its own weight of greed. So sick of it and the apathy of those older than us who are fine with the status quo. Story 24. My first high school computer class. The teacher gave us an assignment that required daily entries into a spreadsheet so that we could graph the data server weeks later. He then gave us a second optional assignment, automate the entries correctly and you don't have to make them at the beginning of class anymore. I thought I was just learning how to mess with Excel, but it turns out I was learning how to work smarter, not harder. I learned to always ask, could I make this easier and get the same result? It served me well for many years, saving my bosses and myself time and money. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 25. For anyone reading this who is working hard for a promotion, please consider what I have to say. It is extremely unusual to get a truly significant raise in a current job. You have already been assigned a value, and working harder will unlikely change that by much. Think of it this way. If they promote you, then it creates a U-sized hole in the organization. If you've been doing the work of 4 people, then they get a really low return on investment if they promote you. Why on earth would they give you more money after the problem you just caused them? In their mind, it's bad business to promote you. Shocking, right? I don't agree with all of this. I'm just keeping it real. You will have better luck talking to your network of contacts and friends to land a new job. In this new job, they have a true need for you, your knowledge and your skills, and are far more likely willing to pay more for it. Jim Rohn once said you get paid in 2 different ways at a job. One way is your paycheck, the other way is what you learn and who you become. So working hard and learning is important to help you in that next job or start that next business. It's wild how my career progression is based on all the things I volunteered to learn and do. The payoff was never in that job, the payoff was in the next job. For example, I would see a need for X in my current job. I would try to become an expert in X by putting in extra hours and hard work. Then when I look for a new job, guess what? Other companies would love to have a so-called expert in X on their team, especially if that expert in X also has years of experience in Y and Z to bring to the table. Story 26. When I worked at Circuit City, I was a top performer. I was trusted to make sales in any department, and I could do installs. Right around the time they laid off a bunch of high-paid staff, they did some sort of management training. They picked some cherry-picking schmuck for the manager. He could take advantage of an easy situation with the best of them. He couldn't overcome objections worth crap, though. He was always in TV and home audio, so he couldn't do crap in any other department. The one thing he had that I didn't was that he looked and sounded like a manager. My appearance was decent, but I kept a 5 o'clock shadow. I didn't care if my pants were cheap, my shirt wasn't crisp, or that I wore casual shoes. All of it was always within the dress code and the norms of the store. He was a real company man, too, don't get me wrong. I was a company man, but I didn't hesitate to call stupid things stupid. Circuit City had plans to lay off a bunch of managers, but we didn't know that at the time. They did announce a management career path weekend workshop. A handful of stores sent their top 3 to 4 to go. All of us went through this thing, and I felt pretty good. A couple of weeks later, the other guy gets this management training opportunity at our store. I had a meeting to discuss what I need to improve on. It was an hour of me trying to figure out what they meant when they said I wasn't leadership ready. It wasn't until we got a new store director that I found out. It was that I didn't look or play the part they wanted. It had nothing to do with my abilities. It was that they were looking for someone to be an absolute loyalist to the company. That made sense since they replace effective, experienced managers with new people. It also makes sense since they did the whole pay range layoff to non-management about a month later. It all became clear now. I had to be the person the company wants. I can change myself to fit or change the company to fit. I've chosen to find the company that fits. I found that 3 out of 5 organizations I have worked for since, the 2 that weren't a fit were good money until I burned out. One was a great cultural fit and one where I learned a lot, but the job just wasn't for me. One was a great fit until I was promoted a couple of times and then it didn't fit so well. I'm in the third now and so far so good. I have had the most success where I'm currently at and I've worked hard here. I'm in my 4th position here because I work damn hard to get things running smoothly and then screw around most of my day when things are smooth. I start to get bored of messing around and poke my nose into things to find work and then it ends in a promotion. Yes, I work damn hard for a bit, but I have messed around more than I have worked hard. Story 27. I was fortunate to get into an arts high school. I was a technical theater major and was one of the only people who really knew much about carpentry because I grew up doing it. A good portion of the carpentry tasks fell on me, and in a way, the department started relying on me and 2 or 3 of my friends for a lot of the set building. Others work hard too, but they were inexperienced and inefficient since they were new to it. I liked the theater portion of high school, but it took up a lot of my time. My academic workload was no joke either. In fact, it was harder than anything I have experienced in college. I made a point of getting straight A's. I was looking to be an engineer and was under a lot of pressure from others to do well. I took every standardized test 3 or more times because I wanted to get into a certain engineering school. I pulled all-nighters at least once a week, and it was pretty normal to spend 14, 16 hours a day working on school. If only I had known then what I know now. I visited the school I was looking to go to and hated the place. I ended up going to a local university that would have accepted me with C's and D's all along, and I loved the program and the people. It's not that I'm saying I would have tried less. I just would not have sacrificed my health and my sanity for an arbitrary qualification that didn't end up mattering at all if I had known that in advance. Those were pretty rough years for me, and I could have enjoyed life a lot more. I still don't understand how it's okay for schools to expect more work from kids than some adults working overtime. It definitely gave me the wrong idea about work-life balance. Story 28. Watching my husband exert himself tirelessly at work and then not qualify for any bonuses was frustrating. His role required him to move between multiple sites, meaning that the driving time between locations wasn't billable, significantly reducing his recorded hours. Meanwhile, colleagues assigned to larger single sites were earning substantial bonuses, even though they often failed to document their work, leaving others without guidance when they were out of the office. This was compounded by the fact that my husband was also handling most of the difficult clients and complex issues because he's exceptionally good at problem solving. He was underemployed for years. I've also witnessed multiple coworkers being let go due to what amounted to personality conflicts with important individuals. Management and HR, in my experience, can often be ineffective. The number of genuinely competent people seems few compared to those who are terrible at their jobs, and those in higher positions always seem to get a pass. It's seemingly never considered that a manager might be the problem when turnover in a department skyrockets. Even when a new manager comes in and suddenly people who had been working there for decades find new employment elsewhere. There's clearly a correlation there that often goes unacknowledged. Story 29. When I was in college, I always had to work summers to pay for tuition. One summer, I worked at a 7-Eleven convenience store. It was a pretty cushy job. I liked the family I worked for, and I liked the customers. We used to get a lot of people who worked for a moving company up the street, the packers, the drivers, and the actual movers. The next summer, I worked for that moving company thinking that since they worked a hard physical job, they must be paid more. Boy, was I wrong. Minimum wage, out in the hot sun all summer, working at a house packing until it was done no matter how late. Lesson learned, find out the pay before going for a job. Story 30. I have an example of when it did and when it didn't. Background, I worked shipping and inventory for a small company. 1 month after being hired and 2 weeks after being on my own, a guy from another department transferred over to work for us. When it didn't pay off, Within 6 months, even though we were doing the same job and neither one of us reported to the other, he was telling people that he was in charge and that I was more or less just working there. People would defer to him for questions I could just as easily answer, ask him to work on higher level projects. You get the picture. This went on for a few months before he had a meeting with upper management. After the meeting, he told me that they would be expanding his role in the company. I was furious. This guy had BS'd his way into that position. He called out way more than I did. Everyone knew he wasn't sick, and I was doing most of the work. When it did pay off, not long after this, he called out sick again, at which point upper management thought he may not be a good fit. This was compounded by the fact he called out so much in the last department that they had considered firing him, hence the transfer. The straw that broke the camel's back was when everyone except me, him, and one other guy was out of town for a convention, and he had called out of 4 out of 5 days that week. We had a huge shipment that we had known was coming, and he wasn't there. It took me all day to get it done. Management then started to look at whether we actually needed 2 people in shipping. The sick days, the fact that just as much work got done when I wasn't there, and the fact that everyone in the warehouse said I did most of the work anyway, meant his next meeting with upper management did not go nearly as well as the first. He was fired, and I got a raise. Story 31. I got my GED and left high school early with my parents' permission. I found high school courses unstimulating, and the high school I was in wouldn't allow dual enrollment. So on the advice of my counselor, they placed me in the local community college. My advisor had me declare a major the first day I saw him, which was confusing since it was a 2-year community college, and the most I could get was an Associate of Arts or Science. I picked Fine Art because I was good at art, and everyone said I should make a career out of it. The AA was the more transferable other credit courses anyway. The only thing any of those classes ever taught me was that your time, effort, technical skill, attention to detail, and passion for your work mean nothing. It's all about how well you can network with influential people. I stuck it out long enough to have an AA for my resume and then left the esteemed halls of higher learning because it felt like a lot of nonsense. That lesson has remained true for many, many things throughout my life. Story 32. This is a bit different from some of the other comments I've read here. I was a very naturally talented student in school. I had a knack for math, a strong grasp of English, and was generally quite good at anything I tried. I was in a 6th grade group project with 3 other students, and each of us had to write a narrative, as if from the perspective of a famous person from history on a particular topic. I think it was the American Civil War. Anyway, we had a week to turn in our projects, and each group had to present who we thought had the best story. I didn't really care for the assignment, so I pushed it off the last minute, but one of my group mates decided she wanted to go all out. I remember she wrote from the perspective of Marie Curie. She actually read an entire biography of the woman in 1 week to properly understand her well enough to write from her perspective, and I remember she even hand-wrote the narrative with a quill pen she borrowed from a relative. If anyone deserved to ace that assignment, it was her. When the grades came out, I got an A, and she got a C. I guess the teacher disagreed with the girl's stance on how a nuclear scientist would have viewed the American Revolution, claiming she missed the point of the assignment. I definitely remember realizing that if I could get a significantly better grade while doing a 10th of the work, why couldn't I do that with every assignment? Story 33. I worked for a pizza shop when I was about 16 or 17. I started as a driver, but very quickly learned literally everything about running the store because the manager, a girl my age, wanted to train someone to do things the right way. I didn't mind because I was a teenager and enjoyed flirting with her. However, as she began working fewer hours, the owner would have me basically managing the store and hardly delivering any pizzas. He'd leave me in charge of other employees, the entire line, the oven, just everything. I was fine with this, figuring it would lead to a raise. The owner would even make comments about giving me a raise and how you really deserve a raise. Eventually, 6 months went by like this and still nothing. Upon asking him if I could get a raise, I was told drivers get tips, so you only get minimum wage. To which I replied, you haven't been letting me take deliveries, so I get no tips. He said, I'll see what I can do. The very next day, I came in to find everyone had gotten little envelopes with money ranging from $120 to $200, except for me. When I asked why, he said, because you're a driver, you don't get a share of the kitchen tips. I finished that shift and never showed up again. Story 34. I worked for a large supermarket as an assistant manager. We went on strike for 2 months. The manager of my department transferred to a non-union store. I took over as part-time manager for 2 months while they selected a new manager. Almost the day the new manager started, the bonus checks were distributed. The new manager received the bonus check for my quarter's work. Fast forward 2 years, I was transferred to a new store. The manager there was suddenly let go, quit, or was bought out, whatever happened. He had 6 weeks of holidays coming, which he took. They still didn't have a manager, so again, that left me in charge. 3 months later, they picked a new manager. It wasn't me again. They brought in the same guy from 2 years prior who had taken over my previous role. Again, almost the day he took over, the bonus checks came out. He received a double bonus, the bonus check from the store he transferred out of, as well as the bonus from the store he transferred into. Once more, I got nothing. The new guy in both stores took home around $9,000 over the two transfers, for which he did nothing but be on good terms with the people in the head office. He wasn't even in the store. Since these were union stores, I couldn't even step down easily. To step down, I would have to go part time or risk no hours at all, as I would be at the bottom of the seniority list. Managers and assistants could transfer in if the same number of hours transferred out. Eventually, I convinced a colleague to take my job and we swapped positions. That was the best day of my career. Am I still bitter? You bet I am. Story 35. When my ex employer canceled my health insurance, HR called my physical therapist to tell them to terminate my care because I'd spent more than enough time getting better and other people need that money too. We're talking a 16-year plus job where the last 5 I'd often find myself doing the jobs of 5 additional people and staying late as well as always being the go-to to watch the office phones, while everyone else went out to celebrate accomplishments or attend each other's weddings, events put on by the nonprofit that I was left out of, etc. All that hard work only accomplished me being the office scapegoat, so I left. Best decision of my life. When I work hard now, it's for myself, and the end goal is money to do other things I like to do, and not because some boss has convinced me I need to be a team player and suck it up. After I left, I found out that my boss and several others whined about the hard work they were now having to do to replace me. Oh well. Story 36. Essential jobs are only essential in the sense that we require them to be done. You don't get paid any different for being essential. That and profit motives for every single business. In fact, that's often the antithesis for encouraging hard work as evidence of this entire thread. In fact, if you work harder, I bet they'll offload someone else's work and fire somebody else. After all, for a boss and capitalist, why pay 2 people when you can only pay 1? So you end up being envied by other coworkers because if you outperform them, then they're liable to be on the chopping block. Often, coworkers with families or really need the income. It creates an entire toxic workplace. At which point, I'm pointing at capitalism and saying, this system is our problem. You're free to disagree. Just know I will never agree. Story 37. I worked for over a decade for a small family-owned business with a total of 6 employees. We often worked over 50 hours a week. I started as a young man at 22, and my bosses had planned on retiring in 15 or 20 years. I had mentioned wanting to buy the business, and I worked to learn all facets of it, confident I could run the place. We had a verbal agreement that I would be next in line when the time came. 6 months before the start of my 11th year, they announced that their adult son was going to quit his job and come to work with us, and that they would like to pass the business on to him. I told them I would give working with him a shot as long as he pulled his own weight and was held to the same standard as the rest of us. I quit right before my 11th year started, about 4 years ago, and as far as I know, he still hasn't worked a full week since he began. I'm now at another family-owned business doing something completely different and have fallen into a management role. I love working 40-hour weeks. Story 38. I work extremely hard at my job physically and mentally, and also overtime doesn't start until after 10 hours instead of the regular 8. I kept telling myself it will all pay off, but in reality, I couldn't even afford to pay my rent anymore and had to move back to my parents at 22 years old. Hard work means nothing if the hard work you're doing can't even pay for basic living. And when I was living on my own, I was extremely exhausted from work every day and I could barely afford to feed myself just so I could pay rent. I didn't even want to even live. I was just working away and didn't even have anything to show for it. The system is so messed up. Story 39. I found out the hard way that in a new professional job with a probation period, it was more important to ingratiate myself to coworkers than to show off my skills. First job with 3-year probation, they loved me the first year. Second year informed me that I would not be offered tenure because I showed contempt for my fellows. I had no idea I was doing that, just had my nose to the grindstone. Second job, I was careful not to do anything that might make my coworkers feel inadequate. I hung around the water cooler and I went to every social event. I passed a 3-year probation, but it was 10 years before I dropped my underachiever act. Remained personable in my own awkward way, though. Story 40. I worked at the same fast food franchise for 5 years, started out with minimum wage, $7.25 an hour, and through hard work and consistency managed to claw my way up to assistant manager and a decent hourly pay of $10.75 an hour. However, our owners went bankrupt and disappeared, causing corporate to take over ownership. The first order of business was deciding that everyone made too much money and knocking all employees' pay down to what the corporate minimum was. I went from $10.75 to $10 within the week without so much as an evaluation of why I made that much or how long I had been with the company. That was my last month working there. Story 41. I worked for a grocery store that's known for requiring all tasks to be completed quickly. I transferred stores when they asked, trained their new hires for a while, and worked closely with store managers and district managers. I took over writing schedules and other store manager tasks. An interview with the director of operation was set up for me to determine if I should be promoted. The interview felt fairly surface level but seemed to go fine. Nothing was said about it until a few days later when I was told the DO wants to wait another year and check back in. When I told my store manager, she said she was surprised I didn't quit on the spot. I don't hold it against them now. I left less than a year later. I hope the DO had a good reason. And if any of these stories got to you, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.